Hello, sweet friends. Welcome back to the podcast. You are listening to episode number 8, all about procrastination. Okay, so we are going to look at and evaluate procrastination, not from a lens of productivity hacks or hustle culture, but through the lens of consciousness and emotional intelligence, because procrastination is not about being lazy. It does not mean you are not motivated, and you definitely don't have to work harder to get through it. Procrastination is about something totally different. And for many of us, procrastination is still holding us back, no matter how hard you work, no matter how many letters behind your name. Procrastination tends to be a problem that affects so many of us. So today we're going to talk about why you procrastinate, how you procrastinate, what are the things you do to procrastinate, and then a few things you can do to work with your procrastination and move forward so it's no longer blocking you or holding you back. All right, let's jump in. Okay. So, why is it that we procrastinate? So, let's say that you had a very important project that you needed to get done. You're sitting there about to start your project and you're not exactly sure where to start. And it kind of has high stakes because your name is going to be on it and a lot of people are going to see it. And instead of sitting down to start it, all of a sudden you find yourself organizing your pantry or suddenly deciding that it is essential to respond to all 37 emails that you have and get to an inbox of 0. That, my friends, is procrastination in action. But what is really going on underneath the procrastination? Now, here is the truth that procrastination is never about avoiding a task. It's not about avoiding that project you're about to start. It's about avoiding how that task is going to make you feel. Procrastination is a form of emotional avoidance. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is if we are about to start something, for example, and we don't know where to start, that might feel paralyzing. I don't know where to start. So instead of feeling paralyzed or I don't know where to start or like I'm going to fail, I'm going to avoid the task altogether and go do something else that makes me feel more productive, like organize my pantry or respond to those emails. So, one of the things that I often see high functioning, high achieving leaders and entrepreneurs do is avoid starting something that they're afraid they don't know how to do because they don't want to mess it up. So for you, it might be avoiding something altogether because you're afraid it's not going to be perfect enough or afraid that you're going to fail. So those are two big ones that we avoid because we don't want to disappoint anybody. We don't want to be disappointed ourselves. We don't want to feel what it feels like to fail. So we don't want to feel that. And we don't want to feel the shame of something not being perfect. And so we avoid tasks altogether. Another big one that I see, another big emotion that I see is avoiding the emotion of dread. For example, how many of you avoid starting your taxes because taxes can feel like dread sometimes and I just don't want to do them? Or avoiding something that might cause a feeling of boredom. You have to do something, review a paper or review something like that, and it just feels so tedious. I just don't want to do it. I just feel bored. And so, what you are avoiding again is not the task, but how that task makes you feel. So, this is a form of protection. It's not a form of sabotage, it's a form of perfection of protection because our nervous system is so brilliant and it's really good at protecting us from anything that's going to make us feel uncomfortable. Failure, shame, boredom, tediousness, dread. It's protecting us from those feelings by having us avoid the task. And that's powerful to know because now what gets to happen is you don't need to judge yourself anymore when you procrastinate. Instead, you get to widen the lens a little bit and look deeper and say, what am I actually avoiding? What am I actually avoiding? Okay, so I want to spend the rest of this episode talking about how you can catch yourself when you're procrastinating and what to do about it so you no longer avoid any emotions or avoid those feelings and you can actually take the actions you want to take. Okay, so there are two main ways that we procrastinate. So I call it positive procrastination and negative procrastination. Now, positive procrastination is very sneaky. Now, the reason why it's important for you to know these things is because Your body is already acting before your brain has had a chance to fully process that I am avoiding a task. You're already taking actions. So the more that you can be in tune as to how I procrastinate, what actions do I take when I procrastinate, the more you can catch yourself, the faster you can catch yourself and shift back into intentional actions. Okay, so there are positive and negative procrastinations. Positive procrastinations are sneaky because positive procrastinations can feel productive. So they feel good. So instead of starting that report or that project you need to start, you decide it's time to organize your calendar or clean your house, organize your desk, catch up on all your emails. Or all of a sudden, this is a really good time for me to go to the gym, especially go this morning. I didn't make it. It's time for me to go now. So it feels like you're doing something that feels good, like you're getting stuff done. You can check something off of a box, but you are still avoiding the important thing, whatever it is, that project. Maybe it's recording a new podcast. Maybe it's meeting a team that you've been dreading. Whatever it is, you are avoiding the main task. So that's positive procrastination because positive procrastination still gives you a dopamine hit because there's still a box you can check that feels good. Okay, negative procrastination has no net positive effect. It has a net negative effect. It's an action you take that might feel good for a second, but actually feels you feeling pretty bad by the end of it. So, for example, like eating a very sugary snack or any snack at all when you normally don't snack in the middle of the day, or binge watching a show on Netflix, just like binge watching a ton of streaming, live streaming or doom scrolling. Doom scrolling is a big one that I often see with folks when they're about to take an action they don't want to take. All of a sudden, they pick up their phone and they turn on Instagram. So, all of these things, all of these negative procrastination, all of these tactics, if you notice, they have no net positive effect. They likely will feel you feeling drained, disappointed, or even more stuck at the end. So I want you to pause for a second and just ask yourself, what are the things that I do to procrastinate? To procrastinate in a positive way and to procrastinate in a negative way. What are those things for me? Can you identify them clearly? Because once you can be clear on what you do, again, awareness is the first step. I don't know if you listened to my last week's episode, but awareness is always the first step. And then from there, you can shift. Okay. So once you know what you do to procrastinate, then you can do something about it. So it's not about trying to beat procrastination, but instead just partner with it, get to know it, become its friend, figure out what emotions do I dread the most, because you will start seeing trends. For me, I like to consider myself sometimes, I call myself a recovering perfectionist as a joke, but for me, it was projects. I would procrastinate on things that I wanted to sound perfect. I wanted them to be excellent and great. And I would procrastinate on those things. Or I would start them and I would never finish them because I would just keep trying to perfect them, perfect them, perfect them. Can I get them to be better? Can I get them to be just a little bit better? And we know that there's a diminishing effect on how hard we can work or how perfect we can get something. So this isn't about forcing ourselves to be more productive. It's about allowing ourselves to lead with clarity and with courage. So I'm going to give you 3 techniques here that you can start using so that you can work with your procrastination. Okay, the first technique is a mindfulness tool that I absolutely love. It's called noting. So, what this does is when you are about to start a project, for example, and you notice yourself go to one of your procrastination tactics, whether it's positive or negative, you pause and you say to yourself, huh, I notice that I'm about to procrastinate, or I notice that I picked up my phone. So my go-to used to be getting all my emails down to in inbox of 0. I was really good at that. And then I caught on to myself and I knew that once I was going to my inbox, when something felt hard and I was about to open up my email inbox, I knew, okay, I know I'm procrastinating. So then I shifted and then my procrastination tactic became doom scrolling on Instagram. So I'd pick up my phone and go to open Instagram. And then I got really good at noticing that too, because I practiced noting. And now I can't really escape it. So the first step is you notice what your body is doing and you say to yourself, huh, I noticed that, and you name whatever tactic. And then you want to ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? What am I actually avoiding? Or what am I afraid will happen if I start? So you want to check in with yourself. Sometimes in these occasions, when you notice that you're procrastinating, Sometimes what you need is to rest. Sometimes you're avoiding something because it might feel hard, and not just feel hard, but take a lot of effort. And maybe you've been pushing all day long, and maybe it's time for you to rest. So check in with yourself, because if you need to intentionally rest, that's powerful. Give yourself what it is that you need. But if you're telling yourself, no, I'm just too tired because you're afraid, you got to check in with yourself and be honest with yourself. Is this an excuse because I'm actually afraid, or do I really need a break? And how you will know the difference is take a break, give yourself 15 minutes and see what happens when you're done. Are you able to come back and get started, or do you come back and have more excuses? So, whatever it is, give yourself what it is that you need. Sometimes it's just awareness. Sometimes it's compassion. Oof, I'm afraid if I start, it's not going to be very good. Or I'm afraid if I start writing, my whatever, my outline for the book, for my book proposal, what if it never gets published? And then I'll feel like such an idiot for even starting. So, you want to just practice noting. So, that's the mindfulness technique of noting. When you name the thought or you name the emotion, what it does is it activates your prefrontal cortex. So noting activates your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that separates you from all other mammals, and it turns off your fear response, your amygdala, because your prefrontal cortex has this negative feedback loop and it turns off your amygdala. So when you activate it in a positive way, it turns off your amygdala. It's pretty powerful. Again, all you need to do is say, I noticed that, and then you name what's there, okay? That's fear, or there's perfectionism, or I notice a resistance. And again, just naming it brings the awareness, and that right there puts you back into the driver's seat. Because from that moment of awareness, now what you're doing is you're pulling yourself out of your thinking brain. You can observe your thinking brain, and then you can make a choice. Okay, I don't want to do that. I want to do this instead. Okay, so that's number one, noting. The second tactic I want to teach you is called A minus work. I used to teach this and I used to call it C plus work. And essentially, it was a way to give high functioning, high achieving folks permission to not always try to get things to perfect. And so I would say, all you need to do is C plus work. C plus is all you need. But I could never get anybody behind C plus work. So now I call it A minus. So A minus work. So here's the thing about A minus work. The thing is, for most of us that are where our brain tilts a little bit towards perfectionism, I want you to notice a few things. In your day to day, what you're actually doing in the world, you probably only require perfection less than maybe like 10, 20% of the time, maybe even less than that for most people. Most of the time, good enough is good enough. So 80, 90% of the time, good enough is good enough. So A minus work is fine. But we latch on to this concept of perfection for a few reasons. One, perfection feels safe. If I make it perfect, nobody can judge me. If I make it perfect, nobody will find out that I'm actually not good enough, or whatever it is, whatever story you're telling yourself. And if you're latching on to, no, I just believe in perfection because things need to always be perfect and excellent, I'm just going to share that you are blocking yourself from innovation, from creativity, and from actually being much more productive than you could really be. For those of you that are always striving for perfection all of the time, when your work likely only requires it less than 10% of the time, you're blocking yourself from being even more productive. You're blocking your teams from more innovation and more creativity. So the sooner you can say, okay, I'm all here for A minus work. A minus work is enough. And truthfully, it is over 90% of the time. A minus work is enough. It's good enough. Aim for A minus work and know that the more you can get out into the world, the better the world will be. When you let go of perfection, you create so much more momentum. And then you learn by doing, not just by constantly obsessing. And I said this earlier, there's this graph of diminishing returns. You guys have probably seen it. It goes upwards. It's like an upward slope that then plateaus at the top. And what that graph is on the x-axis is time, and or effort on the x-axis, and on the y-axis is excellence, like the level of excellence you can actually get something. And so there is definitely in the beginning, more effort equals more excellence, but there comes a point where it doesn't matter how much harder you work or how much more effort you put into it, the level of excellence of whatever you're trying to get out there plateaus. And then now all you're doing is racking your brain to make it more perfect, more perfect, more perfect, but it's plateaued already. So it means all you're doing is causing more pain and more suffering for yourself. So that's the concept of A minus work. And the last one is called dread sprinting. This is one of my favorites, but I love these all. Mindfulness, I use all the time. A- work, I practice all the time. Dread sprinting. Dread sprinting is exactly what it sounds like. You pick the task that you are avoiding, and then you decide that I'm just going to go for it. Because truthfully, there does feel like a little bit of dread before you start. For example, I used to coach, actually, I still coach many, many, many physicians. And one of the things, physician leaders that are still practicing clinically, they still sometimes are hung up by charts. There's a lot of charting that they need to get done that they're not doing. And then it feels dreadful to look at their charts and know they have to do them. And at the core of most of my physician clients that are avoiding their charting is that they want their charting to be perfect. And the thought of how much work has to go into their charts being perfect causes so much dread that they just avoid doing doing their charts at all. So dread sprinting kind of uses the whose law is this? I think it's Newton's law of objects in motion stay in motion, objects at rest stay at rest. So that law of physics essentially is telling you that when you start taking an action, it's so much easier to stay in action. But if you stay at rest, it's so much harder for you to get started. So with dread sprinting, all you need to do is set a timer, 5, 10, maybe 15 minutes, and just run towards the task, run towards the dread, run towards it for a few minutes. And you will notice that once you get started, once you run towards the dread for a few minutes, it actually doesn't feel that much more dreadful anymore. The dread you feel is the anticipation, it's anticipatory dread. It's not the actual action. And once you start, the resistance actually melts away and you find your flow. And all you need is about 5, 10 minutes to start running towards that dread. That's all it takes to interrupt that cycle of the anticipatory dread. It's pretty powerful work. And then once you get started, you can finish your task. Or you can tell yourself, okay, I'm just going to run towards the dread. I'll set a timer for 20 minutes. And if at 20 minutes I want to stop, I'll just pause and try that and see what happens. Most of my clients that do this don't stop at 20 minutes. They go all the way until it's complete. I am dread sprinting towards some tax forms that I have to do because I got to get those done. And I don't want to keep waiting. I just want to get them done. That's the other thing for me that I like to remind myself is all of those little things that I'm putting on a list that I just keep avoiding. When I get them done, it feels so much better. And I remind myself of that. That actually really supports me in doing the things that cause dread. All right, sweet friends, let's wrap up. So, the first reminder I want to leave you with is procrastination is not a character flaw. It does not mean you need to work harder. It does not mean you're lazy. It does not mean that you're unmotivated. Procrastination is an act of emotional avoidance. It's an opportunity for us to get to know ourselves better, to get to know ourselves deeper, to accept what's underneath that, and to be with ourselves, to ask ourselves, with curiosity instead of judgment or criticism, what is it that I'm actually avoiding? And one thing that I teach my students is to always ask themselves, what feeling am I avoiding? So I tell my clients, ask yourself, not just what task you're avoiding, but how would that task make me feel? Because that's what you're actually avoiding. You don't need to bully yourself or push yourself into action. You can actually lead yourself here with kindness, with compassion, with grace. Once you give yourself space to notice, then do one of those three things. Either note, do A- work, do dread sprinting, remind yourself of how good it's going to feel when the task is complete. That will really support you in getting to the finish line of what you want to create. All right, sweet friends, your work matters. Remember that because you matter. And the more that you can get your work out into the world, the better the world will be. And when you're keeping your work to yourself, all your gifts to yourself, you are actually, I don't want to be mean, but consider that an act of selfishness because these gifts are for the world and you can share them with the entire world. And that's what you get to do when you work with your procrastination instead of letting it hold you back. All right, sweet friends, that is all for today. I will see you all next week. Keep leading with purpose and with heart, and I will see you next week. Adios, sweet friends.